We have all encountered people like this. Someone who is absolutely confident in their skills, despite clear evidence to the contrary. A colleague who confidently derails a meeting with their inappropriate suggestions. A relative who, after watching just one documentary, suddenly becomes an expert. An online commentator arguing with professionals. What lies behind this strange gap between confidence and competence? The answer is hidden in a fascinating psychological phenomenon discovered more than 20 years ago. In 1999, social psychologists David Dunning and Justin Kruger published groundbreaking research that forever changed our understanding of human perception. Their work revealed a cognitive bias that now bears their names: the Dunning-Kruger effect. This phenomenon explains why people with the least skills in any area tend to overestimate their abilities, while true experts, on the contrary, underestimate their own. As Dunning himself put it, the first rule of the Dunning-Kruger Club is that you do not know you are a member. Today, we will delve into this psychological phenomenon that, to some extent, affects each of us. We will explore its origins, mechanisms, real-life examples, and most importantly, we will learn to recognize and overcome it within ourselves. After all, the greatest paradox of the Dunning-Kruger effect is that those who are most susceptible to it are often the least able to recognize it in themselves. The discovery of the Dunning-Kruger effect began with an unusual bank robbery. In 1995, MacArthur Wheeler walked into two banks in Pittsburgh in broad daylight, without a disguise, robbed them, and left. When he was arrested that same night, Wheeler was genuinely shocked to learn that the surveillance cameras had captured him. "But I used lemon juice," he protested, convinced that lemon juice would make him invisible to the cameras, based on his understanding that lemon juice could be used as invisible ink. This astonishing case caught the attention of psychologist David Dunning, who was struck by Wheeler's profound misunderstanding and his complete confidence in his faulty logic. This prompted Dunning to ask the question, how can someone be so incompetent that they do not even realize it? He teamed up with graduate student Justin Kruger to systematically investigate this phenomenon. In their landmark study published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, Dunning and Kruger assessed participants on their skills in humor, grammar, and logical reasoning. After each test, participants were asked to evaluate how well they performed compared to others. The results were striking and consistent. Those who fell into the lowest quartile significantly overestimated their performance, believing they had outperformed 62% of their peers, while in reality, they had only surpassed 12%. Meanwhile, high achievers consistently underestimated their relative accomplishments. As Dunning noted, if you are not competent, you cannot understand that you are not competent. The skills required to arrive at the correct answer coincide with the skills needed to recognize that answer as correct. This creates a double time of incompetence. People not only lack the necessary skills for good performance, but they also do not have the metacognitive abilities to recognize their shortcomings. At the core of the Dunning-Kruger effect lies a metacognitive deficiency, the inability to accurately assess one's knowledge and abilities. This metacognitive blindness gives rise to an illusion of superiority, which can be surprisingly resistant to facts. The effect operates through several psychological mechanisms. The first of these is the problem of the unknown unknowns. When we enter an unfamiliar field, we do not realize the full extent of the knowledge or skills required. We do not know what we do not know. As Dunning explains, the skills needed to arrive at the correct answer are also necessary for its evaluation. If you lack experience in any area, you cannot recognize it, including its absence in yourself. The second mechanism is confirmation bias. Once we form an opinion about our abilities, we selectively pay attention to information that confirms this opinion and ignore contradictory facts. A novice confident in their skills will remember their successes, attribute failures to external factors, and interpret ambiguous feedback in their favor. The third mechanism is the difficulty of accurate self-assessment. Even when trying to be objective, people struggle with self-evaluation without benchmarks. In the absence of clear feedback or comparisons, we tend to rate ourselves above average, which is known as the superiority effect. As philosopher Bertrand Russell aptly noted, "The problem with the world is that fools and fanatics are always full of confidence, while wise people are full of doubts." This observation precisely captures the essence of the Dunning-Kruger effect. Confidence and competence are often inversely proportional at the extremes of the knowledge spectrum. Although in popular culture, the Dunning-Kruger effect is often portrayed as a simple inverse relationship between competence and confidence. In reality, this connection is more complex. Researchers have derived a characteristic curve that describes the journey from novice to expert. The journey begins on what is known as the mountain of stupidity, the peaks of confidence experienced by absolute beginners who have acquired enough knowledge to feel informed but are unaware of the vastness of the unexplored area. As Mark Twain wisely noted, "It is not what you do not know that gets you into trouble, but what you know for sure that is not so." Following this initial peak is the valley of despair, when further learning reveals the true scope of the field, causing confidence to plummet sharply. This is the critical moment when many give up, unable to reconcile their self-image with the newly uncovered reality of their limitations. Those who continue the struggle begin a slow ascent up the slope of enlightenment, where both competence and confidence gradually grow. Through diligent practice and learning, they eventually reach a stable level, where high competence is combined with well-tuned confidence. Interestingly, experts often exhibit a slight uncertainty regarding their actual abilities. This doubt arises from a deep understanding of the complexity and nuances in their field. They are acutely aware of the limits of their knowledge and the vastness of what remains unexplored. As Nobel Prize-winning physicist Richard Feynman once said, "It is much more interesting to live not knowing than to have answers that may be wrong." This intellectual humility, a hallmark of true mastery, sharply contrasts with the excessive self-confidence of novices. While most experimental evidence of the Dunning-Kruger effect comes from laboratory studies and educational skills, this phenomenon extends far beyond these contexts, permeating nearly every sphere of human activity. In a professional environment, the effect manifests as an incompetent and uninformed employee who constantly overestimates their performance and contributions. One study showed that 95% of managers believed they performed better than half of their colleagues, which is statistically impossible. This inflated self-assessment often leads to resistance to feedback, limited professional growth, and interpersonal conflicts. In the healthcare field, the effect can have life-threatening consequences. Medical students with the lowest skill levels often have an inflated view of their clinical abilities, which can lead to dangerous overconfidence in clinical decision-making. One study found that doctors who were most confident in their diagnoses were not more accurate than their colleagues, but they were less likely to consult reference materials or seek a second opinion. In politics, this effect helps explain why some of the loudest voices on complex political issues often demonstrate the least understanding of the nuances. Those with superficial knowledge in economics, climatology, or international relations may express absolute confidence in their positions, while experts in these fields typically acknowledge the limitations and uncertainties inherent in their domains. In our digital age, the Dunning-Kruger effect has found particularly fertile ground. Social platforms allow individuals with minimal expertise to broadcast their opinions to a wide audience, with the same apparent confidence as recognized experts. This democratization of voice, while valuable in many ways, has also created what some researchers call a crisis of expertise, blurring the lines between the opinions of novices and experts. As Neil deGrasse Tyson noted, one of the main difficulties in life is knowing enough about a subject to think you are right, but not enough to realize that you are wrong. This beautifully describes the essence of the Dunning-Kruger effect, which extends beyond the academic environment and influences discussions and decision-making in society. The manifestation of the Dunning-Kruger effect is not the same across different cultures. Research shows that cultural factors significantly affect how people assess their abilities and how pronounced this effect is in various societies. In Western, particularly American culture, self-presentation and self-confidence are highly valued. Children are taught from an early age to believe in themselves and their potential, which creates fertile ground for overestimating their own abilities. The American idea of individual achievement and potential may inadvertently amplify the Dunning-Kruger effect, encouraging positive self-assessment regardless of objective outcomes. In contrast, many East Asian cultures emphasize the importance of humility, self-improvement, and awareness of one's limitations. Research indicates that Japanese students often rate themselves below average on many parameters, which is the opposite of the above-average effect often observed in Western samples. This cultural tendency toward self-criticism may mitigate the Dunning-Kruger effect, fostering more cautious self-evaluation. The orientation of a society toward collectivism or individualism also influences the manifestation of this effect. In more collectivist societies, where harmony within the group and interdependence are prioritized, people may be more receptive to feedback from others and less inclined to maintain inflated self-assessments that contradict the group's opinion. As Confucius wisely remarked, true knowledge lies in understanding the limits of one's ignorance. Cultures that incorporate this philosophy into their educational and social systems may naturally develop metacognitive awareness, helping to prevent the emergence of the Dunning-Kruger effect. However, no culture is immune to the fundamental cognitive limitations underlying this effect. The core issue of not knowing what you do not know transcends cultural boundaries, even if its manifestation varies across different societies. While the Dunning-Kruger effect highlights the dangers of overconfidence, it is important to recognize that confidence itself is not the problem. Moreover, a certain degree of self-assurance is necessary for motivation, perseverance, and achieving goals. Confidence becomes an issue when it is significantly misaligned with actual abilities. Such a discrepancy can lead to poor decision-making, resistance to learning, and interpersonal conflict. However, adequate confidence based on realistic self-assessment can be extremely beneficial and contribute to success. Research in the fields of psychology, productivity, and achievement consistently shows that a moderate level of self-confidence is essential for achieving the best results. This confidence encourages action and persistence, but it is not so great that it hinders the recognition of mistakes or the need for improvement. This calibrated confidence represents the golden mean, where belief in oneself aligns with reality. Interestingly, studies also indicate that a slight overestimation of one's abilities can be beneficial in certain situations. This mild, positive illusion can enhance motivation, help overcome initial difficulties, and foster greater persistence in the face of failure. The important distinction here is that a small degree of self-assurance stimulates effort, while a significant overestimation of abilities, characteristic of the Dunning-Kruger effect, can be harmful. As psychologist Albert Bandura noted, individuals with a sense of self-efficacy recover from setbacks. They view situations in terms of how to cope with them, rather than worrying about what might go wrong. This healthy confidence is fundamentally different from the unfounded confidence of those trapped in the Dunning-Kruger effect. The goal is not to eliminate confidence, but to develop it in proportion to actual abilities, combining it with what is called epistemic humility. This balanced approach acknowledges both our capabilities and limitations. Perhaps the most challenging aspect of the Dunning-Kruger effect is self-awareness of it. By its nature, this effect obscures our own incompetence, creating a stubborn mental blind spot that resists self-knowledge. The first step to breaking out of this cycle is recognizing the universal vulnerability to this distortion. No one, regardless of intelligence or education, is immune to overestimating their abilities in areas where they are not experts. As intellectual historian Robert Burton writes, "The feeling of knowledge is not a reliable indicator of whether you truly know something." Practical strategies to counteract this effect begin with actively seeking feedback from others, especially from experts in the relevant field. External evaluation provides an objective perspective that self-assessment often lacks. However, this requires genuine openness to criticism and a willingness to temporarily suspend defensive reactions. Deliberate practice focused on weaknesses can also help align perceived and actual abilities. Such practice should include clear, immediate feedback on performance to calibrate self-assessment. Without this feedback, mere practice can reinforce excessive confidence rather than correct it. Developing metacognitive awareness, reflecting on one's own thinking, serves as another powerful antidote. Regular reflection on the limits of one's own knowledge and a conscious consideration of alternative viewpoints helps to cultivate a habit of questioning initial confidence. As Socrates wisely noted, true wisdom lies in the awareness of one's own ignorance. One of the most challenging yet effective tasks is the ability to accept uncertainty and acknowledge ignorance. In modern society, quick answers and confident assertions are often valued more than thoughtful reflection and the recognition of one's limitations. To withstand this pressure requires intellectual courage, a willingness to say, "I do not know," or "I am not sure," when appropriate. Writer and philosopher Aldous Huxley observed that humanity's inability to learn from history is one of the most important lessons it has to offer. Similarly, a crucial lesson that can be drawn from the Dunning-Kruger effect is the ability to question one's confidence, especially when it is at its peak. Our information landscape has undergone radical changes over the past few decades, creating new dimensions of the Dunning-Kruger effect. The Internet has democratized access to information, allowing anyone to gain a superficial understanding of any topic with just a few quick searches. This easy access to information can create an illusion of understanding, amplifying the Dunning-Kruger effect. The structure of social networks exacerbates this problem, encouraging confident assertions at the expense of deeper analysis. Algorithms tend to promote content that generates active engagement, often leading to the amplification of strong, unqualified statements, while more cautious and reasoned opinions remain in the shadows. This creates an environment where the loudest and most confident voices receive more attention, regardless of their true competence. Filters and echo chambers intensify these trends, isolating individuals from contradictory information that could challenge their confidence and surrounding them only with those who share their views or level of understanding. This leaves little room for recognizing one's own limitations. The vast amounts of information on the Internet contribute to what researchers call knowledge fragmentation, acquiring isolated facts without the conceptual frameworks necessary for meaningful integration. Such fragmented information creates an illusion of understanding without its essence. As author Tom Nichols writes in The Death of Expertise, the internet allows us to interact with far more people than in ordinary life, but it can also create a false impression that our views are more widely shared and correct than they actually are. The solution is not to abandon digital sources of information, but to approach them with greater metacognitive awareness. Addressing these social consequences requires both individual metacognitive development and institutional reforms that better distinguish between confidence and competence, reward intellectual humility alongside proven abilities, and create more effective systems for assessment and transmission. The path through the Dunning-Kruger effect reveals a fundamental paradox of human cognition. The more we learn, the more we realize how much we still do not know. As our circle of knowledge expands, so does our contact with the unknown. This paradox creates an unexpected journey that we have explored, from the unwarranted confidence of novices to the aware uncertainty of experts. This explains why true mastery is often characterized not by absolute confidence, but by the ability to navigate complexity, nuance, and the limitations of current understanding. Awareness of the Dunning-Kruger effect provides us with a powerful tool for self-reflection and intellectual growth. It reminds us that the path to true knowledge begins with acknowledging our limitations and embracing the discomfort of uncertainty. We should cultivate both confidence in our actions and humility in our learning. In a world where increasingly confident voices offer simplified truths, awareness of this cognitive distortion becomes especially valuable.